Cersei strikes an uneasy alliance with Euron. Arya exacts more revenge for the Red Wedding, and Daenerys finally reaches Westeros. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. Particularly if you're a first-time viewer, please do consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. This is my detailed explanation of Season 7, Episode 1 of Game of Thrones. If you have any comments or questions about Episode 1, then please leave them in the comments section below. I'll pick up on these in a second Q&A video later in the week. The season opens with Arya picking up not long after the end of last season. Taking Walder Frey's face, she calls together all of the adult male Freys, poisoning them en masse. This is a massive change in the scale of her assassination operations. Initially, she was just killing the people whose names were on her list. And let's remember that there are actually only 2 people left on that, Cersei and the Mountain. But with the deaths of Walder Frey, and now his entire family, she has expanded it out to anyone who she considers has wronged her family. This time it was 40, maybe 50 men. They may have all been implicit in the murders of her mother and brother, but then again, perhaps some of them weren't. She certainly hasn't given them anything approaching a fair trial. She has appointed herself judge, jury, and executioner, very much Lady Stoneheart's role in the books. Vengeance is hers, and the list of her potential targets has broadened out significantly. And this, perhaps, places what happens to her next into some kind of context. The scene with the Lannister soldiers, as well as being an opportunity for the much-trailed Ed Sheeran cameo, was a chance for her to connect with real people. People who have been caught up in the war and will live or die depending on the whims of the privileged nobility they serve. They may well wear the Lannister colours, the colours of Arya's enemies, but they are not evil. One misses his father, another the child he hasn't seen. They are kind, offering her the first taste of their meat and some wine. Will this give her the reality check she needs to be more discriminating in who she kills next? Or to make her realise how much she misses her own family? Perhaps it will. If it doesn't, then her next step appears to be to head to King's Landing, and who knows how many people there she will deem to be worthy of death. Elsewhere in the Riverlands we find Arya's old travelling companion, the Hound, who is travelling north with the Brotherhood without banners. Like Arya, he is also faced with the real-world impacts of warfare, and his own actions. A father and daughter lying dead, apparently killing themselves before they starved. But there is added poignancy here, for we have seen this farmhouse before. The Hound and Arya stopped here back in Season 4, and the farmer offered them shelter for the night, hot food and a place to sleep. The Hound repaid their kindness by beating up the farmer and taking all of his silver, excusing himself then by saying that they would never have survived the winter anyway. Now, after trying to avoid the place entirely, he eventually accepts to some degree his own culpability for their deaths, and digs graves for them, even saying a crude prayer for them. This isn't just a nod to his identity in the books as the gravedigger. It's another indication that the Hound is changing. The old Hound wouldn't have cared about these long dead bodies, much less that he was responsible for their deaths. Now he feels guilt. He feels an obligation to them. And there are 2 other peculiar things to note in this scene. The first is that, encouraged by Thoros, the Hound stares into the flames and sees a vision. This is surprising in itself for an apparently non-religious man like him to see a vision like that, and what's more, the vision has a ring of truth to it. He sees Eastwatch by the sea, which is where, elsewhere in this episode, Jon sends Tormund and the wildlings to guard the wall. And the Hound also sees the army of the dead, marching ever closer. There's also a nod here to the curious case of Beric Dondarrion. Why has he, not someone else, repeatedly been brought back from the dead? The Hound wants to know. It's a fair question. As he notes, and Beric doesn't disagree, Beric is a good man, but there are arguably better candidates for greatness out there. Does he have a greater purpose? I suspect we will find out this season, as I set out in my recent video on Beric Dondarrion. Moving north of the wall, we get our first sight of the White Walkers on their slow march south, and it's immediately clear that we haven't yet seen the full extent of their army of the undead. It is much, much bigger and more varied than we have seen before. We don't see it all here either, but we do see 3 zombie giants, and we see how the Night King is bringing the storm with him, masking the movements and strength of his army. At the wall itself, we see Bran and Meera, who, after a brief questioning from Ed, are allowed through. They may stop at Castle Black for a bit, but I'm sure that they will soon be heading on down to Winterfell, to Jon and Sansa and the Weirwood Tree. Hopefully they will have figured out a better mode of transport by then, so Meera doesn't have to drag Bran the whole 630 miles or so. In Winterfell, we pick up on the aftermath of the Battle of the Bastards. Jon is already focused on the coming battle with the White Walkers, and it's clear that his focus is starting to cause a few differences of opinion. There's the issue of Jon's call for the North to mobilise for total war, with everyone being trained to fight. This was met with some resistance from Robert Glover, but Lyanna Mormont put him back in his place in her usual style. But perhaps more fundamentally, there is the issue of what to do with the houses in the north that had sided with Ramsay against the Starks. Sansa thinks their castles should be given to allies and loyalists, but Jon rather publicly overrules her, calling forward the new Lady Alice Karstark and Lord Ned Umber, refusing to hold them to account for their father's actions, and gaining expressions of loyalty from them both. But the most interesting thing here, of course, is the emerging dynamic between Jon and Sansa. She seems to have accepted him as King of the North, but still wants to have a strong input into his decisions. And she is sending very mixed signals. On the one hand telling him that he is a good ruler, and on the other comparing him to Joffrey, or telling him he needs to be smarter. He is solely focused on the North, but she thinks he should pay attention to other threats like Cersei. He could care less about the Game of Thrones, but she seems to have developed a taste for it. It's not yet a problem for Team Stark, but it is definitely an uneasy relationship. And when Jon points out that Sansa seems to speak admiringly of Cersei, it's hard to disagree. She clearly has learned a way of thinking from Cersei, and from Littlefinger, whose own plans will no doubt start to take shape over the next couple of episodes. But for now it seems that he is content with just encouraging these seeds of discord between Jon and Sansa. After all, he's been doing that right from halfway through Season 6, just making pointed comments to Sansa about Jon every now and then. Perhaps he'll soon try doing it the other way around, to Jon about Sansa. Meanwhile, in the Citadel, Sam is getting down to the dirty work of learning to be a maester. He is starting on the bottom rung of the ladder, so gets all the worst jobs, and he doesn't seem to be having much of a fun time. But it does have its upsides, as nobody seems to be paying much attention to what he's actually doing with his time. We get confirmation that the arm we saw sticking out from the hole in the trailer is indeed Ser Jorah's, who clearly made his way to the Citadel seeking a cure, although Sam obviously doesn't know who it is yet. I'm sure he will in an episode or two. We are also introduced to Jim Broadbent's character, who is confirmed to be an Archmaester, but we don't know yet which one. He seems slightly more engaged with Sam than the other residents of the Citadel, going as far as to accept that Sam is probably telling the truth about the White Walkers, but he, like the rest of the Maesters, seems astonishingly blasé about it all, basically just saying that bad times come and bad times go, but humanity and the Wall and the Citadel survive. In my view, this is sure foreshadowing that at least one of those things won't survive this time, and my guess is that it will be the Wall. Now, this approach clearly isn't good enough for Sam, who sneaks into the restricted area of the library and starts stealing a few books, bringing them back to a room that he seems to have got to share with Gilly and baby Sam. And I think this is how some of Sam's storyline will pan out this season. He will clearly be tired after long days clearing out chamber pots and serving gruel, but Gilly, who Sam has taught to read, will have time to go through the books he is borrowing, and perhaps make the breakthrough they need. There is clearly a lot to learn here. Just in this one scene we get confirmation that there is indeed a dragonglass mine in Dragonstone, which Sam promptly writes to Jon about, giving him yet another reason to go there. Gilly opens up a book about the legends of Azor Ahai. Sam skips past a picture of the cat's paw dagger that was so central to Season 1. If you remember, it was used by the assassin who tried to kill Bran, and there was a whole mystery about who it belonged to. It was Littlefinger's, but he says he lost it to Tyrion in a bet, and there are hints that Joffrey took it, and it even appears in some of the Season 7 promo pictures in the possession of Arya, so maybe this is also a little bit of foreshadowing. In King's Landing, we have the expected awkward reunion between Jaime and Cersei. Since they last met, he went off and reclaimed Riverrun, and she committed mass murder, caused the suicide of their last remaining son, desecrated the graves of their father and other children, and had herself declared queen. So they have a few things to catch up on. He clearly is angry about the whole situation, despite his protestations to the contrary, but he's keeping it all inside for the moment, and he defaults back into planning their next moves together. She is also still angry about how Jaime released Tyrion from the Black Cells all that time ago, given that he is now senior advisor to their biggest rival to the throne. They are very different people now, with very different attitudes to life, but the connection between them is deep, and the end is now surely drawing near. For now, they both realise the severity of the situation they find themselves in. They are surrounded by enemies, and with winter coming, they are at the mercy of the Tyrells, who control food supplies from the Reach. If they are to survive, the next steps are reasonably obvious. They need to secure the supply of food, probably by force, and they need any allies they can find for the battles ahead. And with everyone else already either backing Daenerys or Jon in the north, the only possible ally is Euron Greyjoy. They don't reach a formal agreement, but they do have a tacit understanding by the time Euron swaggers his way back out of the throne room. He wants to marry her, and she wants her enemies gone. He will return, he says, with a priceless gift for her to prove his trustworthiness. The clear implication here is that he will return with a captive, one of Cersei's enemies. There are a few things here. First, this is an alliance where neither side trusts the other. It is a classic case of the enemy of my enemy being my friend. Euron was always going to attack Yara and Theon anyway, and if they are mixed in with some of Dany's other allies, then so be it. It makes perfect sense for them to team up. But we also have the first real mention in the show of something Euron did before the series started, during the Greyjoy Rebellion. Attack and destroy the Lannister fleet at anchor by Casterly Rock in a Pearl Harbor style attack. A similar attack on Daenerys' fleet at Dragonstone could be incredibly effective if extremely provocative. Finally, Euron proves to be yet another area of division between Cersei and Jaime. Jaime clearly doesn't want an alliance with Euron, but Cersei doesn't seem to care about that. And when Euron arrives, he clearly enjoys making sure Jaime is aware that he wants to marry and sleep with his sister, even going so far as to show off about his 2 fully functional hands. This section of the episode is very much scene setting. Expect Euron to go hunting for his presents to Cersei next episode, and Jaime to head off to Highgarden with the Lannister army to deal with Olenna Tyrell. Finally, we see Dany arrive at Dragonstone. This is a big moment for her, arriving back at the Targaryen ancestral home and the place of her birth. And it is deserted after Stannis' forces left it a few years earlier, which makes for a slightly eerie and almost anticlimactic arrival. Not a word is spoken as Dany silently takes ownership of the castle, but it is noticeable that on entering the throne room, she doesn't pause to sit on the throne. Instead, she moves straight into the map room and says, "Shall we begin?" It is indicative of her frame of mind. She takes her time to drink in her new surroundings, but there is no resting on her laurels here. She doesn't want to be Queen of Dragonstone. She wants to be Queen of the whole 7 Kingdoms, and she doesn't want to waste a second. So what do we make of the episode as a whole? Well, it's clearly a scene-setting episode, setting up the main plot points for the season. Daenerys' invasion, Cersei's desperate attempts to cling on to power, and Jon's relentless attempts to get people to focus on the threat from the White Walkers. But there are also quite a few pointers for things to come. We can expect to see the Brotherhood without banners meet Tormund at Eastwatch, and to find out why Beric has been brought back so many times. Jaime and Cersei's relationship will soon reach a tipping point, and Euron will be hunting down prizes to bring to Cersei, while the Lannisters themselves will attack Highgarden. Littlefinger will be trying to drive a wedge between the Starks, Arya is still killing people, and Sam and Gilly are desperately gathering knowledge that may help in the wars to come. Just as importantly, we see the continuation of some of the themes that have been developing through the seasons. Those who have been broken by the events of the War of the 5 Kings, like the Hound, will continue to recover and grow, becoming better, more well-rounded people. The role of women in society is being challenged, not just with all the female leaders, but with women as well as men being taught to fight in the north, and with Gilly subverting the Citadel's rules by reading the books Sam steals from there. And there will still be people who strive to achieve power for themselves, while the normal people of Westeros suffer. Westeros will be a changed place once the dust settles on the War for the Dawn, and the seeds for that are being sown now. What do you think? What did you notice about this episode? And do you have any questions that you'd like me to pick up in my Q&A video later this week? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to support me in producing more videos like this, as well as getting access to more of my content, please click through to my Patreon page. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to know when my next video comes out, then please click on the subscribe button and make sure your notifications are enabled. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.